people
Right here.
looks like an octopus.
Oh,
And there's
yeah, right here.
Yeah, and there's some like local like bootling term for it that I forgot. That's just like the old school, like, I don't know.
Love it.
It's like
Love
Cthulhu
it.
or something like that.
Love hearing some of the history. Perfect. Well, looks like we've got a good crowd in here so far. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So I'll kick things off. Welcome to the first webinar of 2022 for us here at VECKTA. We're incredibly excited to be joined by Kevin McGee, President and CEO of Anderson Valley Brewing Company. Today we'll be learning more about Kevin, the brewery, and their journey to energy independence. So a little bit on what we'll be covering, brief agenda. So we'll go through some brief introductions, have some background on Anderson Valley Brewing Company itself, some insights on the changing energy landscape and the importance of energy independence, and Kevin's journey to a new energy system. From an administrative perspective, there will be a few polls during the session, and we'd love to have your participation. If you have questions, please click the question mark icon and drop them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end. And just so everyone's aware, this session is being recorded and will be made available to you following the session for sharing with your colleagues and friends as you see fit. So a little about our guest. Kevin McGee is the president and CEO of Anderson Valley Brewing Company from Boonville, California, and the founder of Healdsburg Beer Company of Healdsburg, California. We'll be talking much more about Anderson Valley Brewing Company during today's session, but Healdsburg Beer Company was founded in 2007 when Kevin turned his garage into a licensed and bonded commercial brewery and has been operating a one-barrel brew house out of it for the past 14 years. He has spent the last 18 years working with beer and wine businesses. He is a graduate of the executive program at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and has been practicing law for almost 25 years. Kevin's background includes being the personal legal counsel and business strategist to wine industry legend Jess Jackson, founder of the Kendall Jackson Wine Empire, and serving as CEO of a wine and hospitality-focused private equity firm with assets under management of just over $100 million, and businesses encompassing over 140 employees spread over 3 continents. More recently, Kevin worked as an operating partner and strategic advisor in the alcohol, beverage, cannabis, and consumer products industries through his firm Tradecraft Strategic Advisors. His legal background involves government affairs, complex litigation, mergers and acquisitions, intellectual property, and a broad corporate development and business practice. Kevin previously worked as a prosecutor for San Mateo County and the city and county of San Francisco, and spent 8 years teaching gang violence law and trial skills for the California District Attorneys Association. Kevin lives in Healdsburg, California, with his wife, daughter, kitten, and 2 puppies. And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales and marketing at VECKTA. I've spent my career in high-growth enterprise software companies across a wide variety of industries. At VECKTA, I lead the strategy and process for engaging and helping energy users around the world access cheaper, more reliable, and cleaner energy solutions. Prior to VECKTA, I led top-performing sales teams in the digital identity and telemedicine industries. I actually grew up about 12 miles from Anderson Valley Brewing Company in Ukiah, California, and now live in Laguna Niguel, California with my wife and 2 young boys. So let's kick things off, and I guess, Kevin, tell us a little bit about Anderson Valley itself, not the brewery quite yet, but Anderson Valley and what makes this place so special.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique location. So we're about 2 hours north of San Francisco, and it's come in the last like 5 years or so into some really impressive renown as a world-class Pinot Noir growing region. Probably, I'd say, one of the top 4 in the world. It's also kind of rural. It's fairly rustic. It's an interesting combination of sort of world-class, super high-end wine growing and fairly rural, kind of 1950s sentimentality and stuff too. So where we are is kind of a crossroads on the way out to the ocean. Anderson Valley itself is a strip. It runs north-south and is absolutely gorgeous. It's covered with like redwood trees and everything else. The picture that was in the cover sheet for the deck, actually, I took from the roof of the brew house here at the brewery. So we're kind of surrounded by a lot of, just beautiful vistas, and it makes sustainability, environmental practices kind of top of mind when you look out the door. And you see this kind of stuff too. So, but Anderson, it's a great place. A lot of locals, a lot of local pride.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into the history of the brewery, let's do a quick poll and on who we have in the audience today. Tyler, are you able to cue that up? So here we go. So do you own or work at a manufacturing company? And you'll see the options there as far as whether you're at a brewery, a winery, in the food and beverage industry, or outside of food and beverage. We'll give it another couple minutes here, or 30 seconds. Looks like we've got some votes rolling in. Excellent. Excellent. So it looks like quite a bit of the audience is actually outside of the food and beverage space, but a couple within as well. So just good to get a snapshot of who we've got in the audience. Thanks for participating, everyone that did. So tell us a little bit about the brewery, and really, I think one of the things I'm curious about is the secret to remaining in business for over 35 years now.
So the brewery was started by 3 people in the basement of this building here, the Buckhorn Saloon, and actually it was started at a time when there really wasn't anybody making beer at that scale. It was about, I think, like 18 to 22 during that time. Other kind of microbreweries, and it was even before the term microbrewery started. So they got a bunch of old dairy equipment together, put it down in the basement, and talking with them, the original brew that they did took them forever because they were using the equipment for the first time. They actually ended up spending the night at the brewery and sleeping on top of one of the tanks for warmth. Since then, they grew out of that particular building and moved to where we are now. So we're on almost 30 acres. We have 5 fairly sizable buildings, and it was built between, I think, 94 to 96, specifically for the brewery. It was purpose-built here. And there's a lot of factors that went into the decisions then, have pretty significant environmental considerations today, but talk about that later. But also, the brewery really kind of grew up at a time where it was had the opportunity to be one of only a handful of breweries that were really driving and pioneering the early 90s craft beer phase, which then had a shakeout, and Anderson survived, thankfully. And really, it survived pretty much on the strength of the quality of its beer, and also on a bit of a quirky kind of differentiated attitude. It doesn't take itself really that seriously. Our mascot is a legendary cross between a deer and a bear, which is, the joke is, what do you get when you cross a deer and a bear? You get a beer. And that's where the bear with the antlers comes from. So that seemed to resonate with people. But really, it's, we have a bunch of employees here that have been with the brewery for more than 20 years. My 3 senior brewmasters, or my 3 senior brewers combined, have over 60 years of brewing on our system here too. So we've had a lot of continuity and a lot of skill that have followed the brewery along for the last couple of decades. And that, I think, is really what's kept us along.
No doubt. And in fact, when I was putting together, by the way, is there an echo? I'm hearing a bit of an echo. No,
there's a little bit of one, but it's manageable.
Gotcha. When I was putting together the deck, I reminisced about this particular Buckhorn Saloon, and going there on our journeys over to the coast. You mentioned it's a bit Boonville and Anderson Valley being at a bit of a crossroads. It's certainly an area that we pass through often. And some on the call might be wondering what this term is as the last bullet here. Maybe you can share a little bit about Ball-Hornin.
Yeah. So Ball-Hornin is a Boontling term. So there's actually, I've got a book here. The town of Boonville. This was a Valentine's Day gift from my wife, so that I could understand what the locals were saying about me. The town of Boonville developed its own lingo. There's only 3 recognized lingos in the English language. One is Creole, the other is Pidgin, and the third is Boontling. And really what it is just a local dialect. And it's a lot of different vocabulary words. Ball-Hornin means good drinking. So Hornin is like a horn, almost like a drinking horn. Ball is a term that actually refers to a brand of sneaker back in like the 40s, and that had a red ball on the side that the locals considered to be the best sneaker. So if something was the best, it was like the ball. And so that's where ball horning comes from. And there are other things like a payphone was known as a Bucky Walter, because Bucky was a term for a nickel, and Walter was the name of the guy who had the first phone in town. So it's basically it's a massively overcomplicated series of like inside jokes and references that turned into basically a language. And there's some old, video and Tonight Show episodes and stuff of people, speaking Bootling and things like that too. So in the past, the brewery had used a lot of Bootling in its marketing. We don't do as much now because it's kind of hard to promote a beer that doesn't have many vowels and a bunch of apostrophes, but it's still part of the history of the area.
Well, and I still love that, to your point earlier about the bit of a quirkiness to the brewery, still pay homage to the local area with the inclusion of ball horning on a lot of your packaging.
Yeah, and there's some employees that still speak it fluently.
Excellent. Well, let's shift a little bit to touching a bit on your environmental commitment. And I think really the brewery has been focused on sustainability long before it was cool. And so what does sustainability mean to you, and what all do you guys do within the vein of sustainability?
Yeah, the brewery actually has been quietly sort of leading the field for a long time. So my family bought the brewery at the end of 2019 and actually discovered not very long ago that actually during the process of working with VECKTA, that we are in fact the world's first solar powered brewery. We had the photovoltaic cells that you see in the picture there installed in 2005. It generates about 45% of our power, but it's old technology and we're expanding that. We'll obviously talk about that later. But the big thing about the brewery and it's the way that it was built and structured in terms of how it all works together was there was a need to have sort of stable and self-controlled management over a lot of these very essential functions. Big one being water, power, obviously, and then managing solid waste and some of the other things. Just things coming in and out of the brewery because of its location was both a choke point and a vulnerability for the brewery. And so when they built it, they took a lot of that responsibility kind of into their own hands. And a big piece of that is our water system. So you can actually see the major parts of our water system in this picture. So up in the top left where the cursor is, that's part of our treatment system. And actually those tanks at the top of the picture in the back of our dry goods storage building, those are cisterns. So we source all of our water from 10 wells that are spaced around the property. We bring it in, store it in the cisterns, and then it's used in those buildings that you see there. And then the wastewater is then run through our treatment system, part of which are those settlement ponds, which starts kind of in the back, moves forward. And then the wastewater is then discharged into a goat pen, which is not in the picture, and returned to the water table that we take it from. So the way it kind of functionally operates and nets out is that unless the water that we use leaves the property as an ingredient or somehow evaporates during the brewing process, we return 100% of our water back to the water table we take it from after we treat it. And it's basically a self-contained water use cycle. And I'm not aware of anybody else actually in the world that's doing that. And that's a system that the original owners set up in the mid 90s. I mean, we've been, quietly doing this extremely forward-looking, highly efficient, and super environmentally responsible practice for more than 20 years and really not telling anybody about it. So we're starting to tell people about it. And then one of the other things that we do and have done is that all of the solid waste that comes off of our brewing process in terms of spent grains and yeast and other things is repurposed. And the guy was just here, trucked away to feed cattle. So all of our solid waste from our brewing process goes into either fertilization in their field or actually feeds local cows So we contribute none of our waste from our brewing to landfills, which is really cool. Some of the other stuff that we're doing, we have a nitrogen generator, which scrubs ambient air for and creates N2, which we have used to reduce our CO2 usage in the brewery for process uses by 70–80%. Which allows us to use an inert gas. It won't kill you if you get stuck in a tank with it, and then I don't have to have a truck come and deliver it. And so that's been operating for over a year now. And then we're pivoting all of our packaging over to 100% endlessly recyclable cardboard and aluminum. We've eliminated all plastic from our packaging, and we'll be done with glass probably this summer. Big piece of that is the shipping. I can ship almost 5-to-1 ratio of empties into the brewery, aluminum to glass, and then shipping it out. Something like the ratio is 110 cases to 72 cases in glass. So a lot of trucks off the road, and it's a completely endlessly recyclable package, which is cool. So
well, thank you for continuing the tradition, the founder style of sustainability. So let's shift gears. You mentioned buying the brewery back in 2019. So maybe you can share a little bit about kind of since what attracted you to the brewery, and why did you acquire it, and tell us about the last couple of years.
Sure. The last couple of years have been pretty crazy. We bought the brewery in December of 2019, and then about 2.5 months later, we had quarantine, which has been interesting. So my background, been in alcoholic beverages in some way or form, other than as a consumer, for about 18 years now. And while I was working as an executive in the Kendall Jackson and Jackson Family Wines organization, I got my garage licensed as a brewery and was making beer for fun. And so I was making beer 30 gallons at a time for the last 14–15 years. And after I left the Jackson family side of things, I started working in doing consulting, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, business consulting. Basically, if something was on fire, I was the kind of person that would get a phone call to see if I can try and fix it. A lot of smoking craters and M&A and that kind of stuff. So through having the brewery in my garage, I got to know the local craft beer community, and that turned into a number of engagements and a lot of business doing consulting work for beer. So I got to know the beer business really well. So back in about 2018, talking with my dad, who's in the picture here, he really had the idea of wanting to get involved in a family business and something that we could hold for multiple generations, something that we could do and kind of lay some roots down in. And so I had thought of beer just because of how it compares, and frankly, it was because of how I saw beer being able to operate in crisis environments compared to things like wine and some other consumer products. That there's a lot more levers and a lot more flexibility in your operational inputs, and you can pivot a lot better with a brewery than you can a lot of other stuff. And so that seemed like a good way to go. And we looked at a number of breweries, took a hard look at about 5. And I had always known of Anderson because I had lived relatively close by, but hadn't heard much from them in a little while. And the former owners didn't really do a lot of consumer marketing, but the beer had always been just stellar. And that was really kind of the biggest selection criteria, kind of no-go for us, was the beer had to be good. If I had to make apologies for, exploding slushy stouts or some other dalliance and things that just didn't taste good, it was much harder kind of lift for turning around a business. So Anderson did not have that problem. Also, Anderson had, this location. It had the facility. The kettles that you see in the picture here were bought from Bavaria in the 90s, and they're hand-hammered copper that was made in the 50s in Germany. And there's very few things like it in the world. And there was just a level of and depth of authenticity and substance to this brewery. And like I said, there's people that have been brewing here for more than 20 years. That just was really meaningful. And we thought that there was just a great opportunity to tell more of the story to more people. And it was going to be a privilege to kind of be involved. And So we got to know, I got an introduction to the owner at the time, and within about 4 months, we were able to negotiate a purchase, and we took on the brewery and been here for the last 2 years doing a lot of rebranding and restructuring, put in a completely stem to stern ERP system. We started new packaging, new logo design, all the stuff you see behind me there, moving to full wrap, cartons and packaging, as well as redoing a bunch of our distributor networks and all of the unsexy things that no one ever thinks about when they think of beer. So it's been a very dynamic last 2 years, kind of thinking as COVID was going on, we decided to control the things that we could control. And so pretty aggressively did about a dozen things simultaneously. You normally do one at a time. And one of them was, looking at our power needs and what was going on with our solar program and how to manage risk in our specific environment up here in Northern California with fire and all the other kinds of stuff that Dan and VECKTA were able to help us out with.
Yeah, certainly. Before we get into some of that, I'm hearing that echo again in the transition, but maybe we can talk a little bit about the fun part of the property and the brewery that you were implementing.
Mm-hmm. The beer park. So I finally put my law degree to good use, and I took, if you see the tap room sign there, kind of in the middle to the left, I took the license from the tap room and worked with the local ABC and redefined its perimeter as the fence line of the property. So I took that little section there, and now the entire property is licensed basically as an open air tap room, and we have almost a 30-acre beer garden. We have, in addition to being the world's first solar powered brewery, we're also the world's first 18-hole disc golf course at a brewery. And so those are all the lines that you see there. So we don't charge anyone for coming on the property and playing disc golf. We're family friendly. We're dog friendly. We have a little group, the hashtag Dogs of Beer Park, that pop up on social media all the time. This is just generally kind of a map of the property, and the whole thing is open to people to come and hang out. We've got different areas kind of in the center there, which are not crisscrossed by discs, so you don't have to worry about getting hit by anything. Areas for tap stations sort of on the western and eastern edge. And then right around the tap room, we have a massive lounge lawn. We planted about 10,000 square feet and added 80 or so Adirondack chairs in various colors. And we set up bands that play outside there. So pretty much every Friday and most Saturdays, we'll have a band and we'll have a food truck that comes up, and people kind of hang out and use it as a community center. A lot of the tasting room employees from around the area use it as a place to meet on their way out of town. We're on the southern edge of Boonville at the crossroads. They used to call it the corners, actually. So we're basically at the intersection on the way out of town. And so we've been a place for people to meet and, have a drink, listen to some music, and then take off and go home. It's gone really well. Actually, we're about 2 or 3 times busier now, even during COVID, than we were in 2019.
That's great to hear. Kevin, when you finish speaking, would you mind reading? Because I think that's part of it.
Sure.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear all the new additions, and can't wait to get up there and check it out myself. And I know you have all kinds of fun activities. So let's move to maybe a bit more serious subject. But so while PG&E customers, and you're in PG&E territory, in high fire threat areas are more likely to be affected. I think to share with those in the audience here. So any of PG&E's more than 5 million electric customers, while they may not be in immediate fire zones, could have their power shut off if their community relies on a line that passes through a high fire threat area due to these public safety power shutoffs. And I think it's also important to note that the threat of shutoffs is not just from safety shutoffs. In 2020, across the U.S., of all the major outages that occurred, 43% were due to severe weather and natural disasters. 19% were actually from system operations, 16% from attack or vandalism, and 22% from various other causes. And I think notably from current events, just this week, the FBI reported that 5 major U.S. energy companies had experienced probing from Russian hackers. And so this need for energy independence is certainly something that's growing. And in addition to the lack of reliability, you also see on the left here the rise in rates. Now this goes back to the late 70s, where you see over 5x increases, and even in the last 18, 20 years, 2 to 2.5x. And just recently, PG&E, as part of their 2023 proposal to the California Public Utilities Commission, for your business type, Kevin, has proposed nearly an 18.5% rate hike for 2023. Yet to be approved, but something that PG&E is pushing for. So you've had the solar system there at the brewery since 2005, but how has solar alone not met your needs and driven you to this new exploration?
So taking a look at our program and what was happening, we did recognize that it wasn't really meeting our needs right now. The way that the system works, I mean, first, it's 2005 technology. It is contributing power back to the grid. There's no storage here on site. And the other thing is that it doesn't insulate us from power shutoffs. And we, in addition to public safety power shutoffs, just because of where we're located, we've had some other interruptions on occasion, either due to maintenance or some tree work or whatever. And then there's even been situations where PG&E tells us they're going to shut off the power a particular day to work on transformer somewhere, and then they don't, and they don't tell us, and I've had to reschedule a bunch of people around and things like that. So we're pretty dependent on how PG&E decides or doesn't decide what they want to do with power, and then they're also raising rates in order to pay for some of the maintenance and things like that they have to go there. So that kind of vulnerability and stability of our utilities was a concern. And then the other part of it, and which kind of led me down the road of taking a look at expanding and developing the solar program we have here, was the need for redundancy. And I took a look at what it would take to get a diesel generator, and then what it takes to run the diesel generator, and the cost of the diesel, and all those other types of things. And as an alternative, I looked into storage solutions, battery storage solutions, and then that led to an exploration in, well, what if we just do something bigger and start thinking about a microgrid system? And then that would kind of solve a lot of the problems that we had. Just having the PV here on the roofs was great because it helped defer a bunch of our power usage and that type of thing, but it didn't solve redundancy. It didn't solve with independence, and it also didn't help as much with pricing stability. So all of those reasons were still problems.
Yeah, certainly. So, and then more recently, over the last couple of years, there seems to be a rise in the public safety power shutoffs. You've already experienced up to, I mean, there's been shorter ones, but 7-day outages as well. And how has that impacted the brewery?
Yeah, we've had to put a plan in place where, on a very short timeline, to try and isolate any of the liquid or anything that we're doing. As a brewery, we're a little bit advantaged because the manufacturing cycle that we have, like I said, is a little bit nimble, but we still need to make sure that we don't get stuck with product or inventory that's kind of in a middle stage. The biggest problem that we have is that extended shutoffs cut off all of our cooling. And because of that, we can have issues with product that's fermenting, which temperatures go out of whack. That can develop off flavors and lead to us having to dump up to 3,000, 9,000 gallons of beer, and then storage of finished goods. If the finished goods get out of temperature too, then there may be some vulnerability to that kind of thing. So it's a real issue for work in progress for us.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I'm sure from the other conversations we have, it's impacting a wide variety of businesses. Well, I think let's do another poll here. So I'm going to push this out to the group. So in addition to saving money on energy, what are you most concerned about at your business? Reliability issues like Kevin's facing, reducing carbon emissions and being more sustainable. It's all about the costs. So neither of those are too much of a concern, or is it something else? Go got some good votes rolling in. Give it another few seconds. All right, it looks like it's, and I can publish some results here to the group, but looks like it's a little heavier on the carbon emissions, which is great to see. I think that shift, while you guys have been doing it for 20, 30 years, Kevin, I think that shift has really been happening in a very big way over the last couple of years. So that's great to see. Looks like it's all about the cost. Yeah, I think that's something that we hold true. It's you want to be able to be more sustainable, increase reliability, but at the end of the day, it always has to be profitable. So that's something I would say is a key consideration in all this. So, well, let's move on to, so you've identified this need for energy independence, and now you've shifted to a couple of years ago exploring what the potential options for you are. And so walk us through your experience as you started to go on this journey of saying we need a better system than what we have today. You started to discover microgrids, and tell us about what that journey's been like initially.
Yeah, I had, I think my brother had a few connections to people in sustainable energy development space. And so I was able to kind of pick their brains a little bit and just get myself, conversant with the terminology, which was kind of half the battle. And then just looking around and understanding what a microgrid was and what it meant to the concerns that I had for the brewery. And we were able to engage with a fairly large, kind of well-known developer firm and spent not quite a year working with them in terms of designing a solution, understanding what it meant, how it would work, what the switching looks like with the microgrid, how the islanding would work from the perspective of the brewery looking out. And getting kind of comfortable with technology timeline and those other mechanisms. And then, unfortunately, it kind of fell apart like right at the end when the contract that I was provided with for sort of a power as a service was sent to us and just had a lot of just sort of unacceptable things in it. And we went pretty far down the road with this firm. And the combination of some of the terms and the way that it was being structured, and I used to run a private equity firm, so I knew kind of where some of the terminology and the terms were coming from. It was, not to my benefit, and I also didn't have a real high level of confidence that the actual technology and system that I was being presented with didn't have other alternatives or other things that could be tweaked in it, because really I kind of only saw one system built out through this process, and that was the one that they were presenting to me. So we hit pause on that, and through another conversation that I had with another professional in the area, I got introduced to the folks at VECKTA and reached out, and then we started that conversation going through the other process. Which is where we are today.
Yeah, so maybe tell us about that journey and that journey after we got completed.
So really the biggest thing that has resulted, and then I'll kind of walk back and talk about it, is that we were able to get a number of highly qualified firms all producing work product and concepts and systems for us to evaluate, developed a very high level of confidence in us in both the technology and systems that were being proposed by being able to compare them, but also cost and economics that were involved too. And that really kind of happened through working with the VECKTA team. We got our heads together. I thankfully had a better understanding of how to communicate about this stuff from like the 10 or so months that I had spent working on it. And we were able to design parameters and put out an RFP that explained who we were, what we were looking for, and how we wanted to approach it. Through VECKTA's platform, they were able to populate all that information, disseminate it out to viable vendors, and we got a bunch of good responses really very quickly. Then I was able to go online and kind of compare them side by side take a look at them, rank where they fit with our priorities on different categories, and they were kind of broken down into different areas of the RFP, and so some of those areas were of higher concern, so we were able to weight into those more in how we were adding up the rankings and stuff. But realistically, it was like reading through them all, it was pretty clear. There were some proposals that just separated themselves, but it was invaluable to be able to read through 5, 6 proposals side by side for the same project, and be able to see where those points of differentiation really are. And then went through that, basically, selected a winner, engaged with them, finished up the process of kind of engaging them to start with interconnection stuff. And where we are right now is we're working with a financial partner in terms of a lease structure. So the way that we elected to do this is not, a power for service, but rather a, long-term lease on the equipment. We scaled the cash impact of the lease to be consistent with our current energy costs. So the idea was, and looks like we're actually executing on it, to freeze our electricity costs basically at what we're doing today over the life of the project. So we're not subject to fluctuations and rise in energy costs and utility bills, and then be able to actually pay into that rather than just paying rent and sending it off to PG&E. We're paying in on a principal, and we'll have residual value to buy out the system at the end of the lease term. So rather than, frankly, renting power from someone who keeps raising the rent, we're actually able to invest in and pay down the principal and freeze our exposure to fluctuations of utility costs while still contributing to paying down principal and actually owning the equipment at the end of it. And when you kind of pull it apart, it's just an incredible opportunity, frankly, for the brewery to be able to take that kind of control over its energy system.
Yeah. I know you experienced the one of the things that we find in the industry with folks like yourself. This is your first time going about buying an energy system, and there's really information asymmetry as a problem within the market where you've never purchased a system like this. The sellers that are selling to you are do this. This is what they do. This is the business that they're in, and so you kind of experienced that in the first phase, it sounds like. And really, one of the things that we set out to do is similar to what's happened in the housing or house or car buying markets, with the likes of platforms like Carvana and Carfax and Zillow and others that are helping inform buyers of the nuances of these large purchases. VECKTA is really trying to help arm you. So did you find that in that process, being able to highlight certain things and both getting you access to vetted suppliers, but also working through the nuances of that ask of the market, as well as making sense of the proposals back? How did that impact your comfortability with moving forward with this project?
Well, I think it was critical. It's a serious project. It's a big thing, for us to do. I mean, we're very proud that we can be able to kind of do this, and we're trying to lead by example on a lot of the sustainability functions, and to be able to do that with the level of confidence that we now have. I mean, being able to, the original vendor that we talked to was part of the proposal process, and so they changed their proposal slightly to be a little bit friendlier to what our criteria were. But even in doing that, comparing it to the other options, they were out of market on a couple different areas. And so having the ability to go through the VECKTA process and have those vendors come and make those proposals to where you can compare it, and not everything is like apples to apples because everybody is slightly different, but it's close enough that it's pretty vivid when you have a disconnect. And it showed us that the instinct that we had, that the original process we went through was really off base, was in fact the case. It was off base, and we wouldn't have known that unless we were able to get into a situation where we're able to bring in the RFP responses that VECKTA's process brought us. So and then at the end, the end state of the whole thing is that I have a way better understanding now of what the whole the project entails and costs and what, to be a good partner, because, we're going to be partnering with these people. We're going to be married, basically. I mean, this is 20+ year relationship. To understand what their economic constraints are and what their business model is and that kind of thing allows me to be a better partner and make sure that the things that are important to them, we're able to service for them just the same as like the things that are important to us, they're able to service too. So that was another, frankly, kind of unintended, result of a lot of this, is that I understand the business that they're going through a lot better, which frankly makes me a better customer. So that helps a lot too. But I mean, the going through the process and going through the evaluation and being able to get access to really, I mean, very highly qualified vendors like that is absolutely critical for confidence. And there's nothing else, that I could think of, like it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So let's take a look briefly at the system. So this new system is much more comprehensive than the old solar array that you're actually going to have removed as part of this process. You're incorporating storage, islanding capabilities, and certainly a much larger solar system or photovoltaic system, including ground mount, as you see on the north end of the property, somewhat surrounding, or at least surrounding on a couple sides of your water system that you were talking about before. So while there was some variance in the systems that were proposed to you, what you're seeing here from a spec perspective is the system from the developers that you've decided to move forward with. How does your staff feel? I don't know how much you've shared with them, but how does your staff feel about these new capabilities, particularly the increased sustainability and the ride-through capabilities and islanding?
The operational staff thinks it's awesome because they're tired of dealing with power outages and other things too. The rest of the staff too are all really excited to be able to talk about this. The brewery has used solar power in its marketing for a long, long time. All of the bottle caps that the brewery has ever gone out with have that little solar symbols. It's solar powered brewery. Actually, I think solar powered brewery is a trademark that one of the former owners got. So it's always been a part of the ethos of the brewery, and being able to kind of bring it more into a modern era, and be able to talk about almost going off the grid. There's actually a possibility with our vendor where if we want to add a little bit more of kind of redundancy capability, we can go completely off of the PG&E grid without even an umbilical, and that's really kind of groundbreaking. Don't know if I'm quite there yet. We can always add it later, but that's the kind of thinking that we're talking about. The whole idea, like I said, is really part of the pride of the brewery too. So everybody's really excited about it. And then we have also other relationships with vendors like Whole Foods, and Sprouts and some other retail establishments that are very environmentally conscious. And the idea that we can communicate this kind of stuff and the things that we're working on here really helps separate us, in that respect too. And so they want to partner with us so we can do things for Earth Day and other things that are more meaningful. And again, the fact that we've been doing these kinds of practices for 25 years in some cases also eliminates the idea that we're kind of greenwashing or anything. And we're operationally doing things and installing infrastructure and reducing our carbon usage and other metrics through operational means, and not having to resort to buying carbon credits. And carbon credits are fine. The carbon credit market, depending on who you talk to, is is either this or is that. But it's one thing to be able to reduce your carbon footprint by buying carbon credits, and it's another thing to be able to do it operationally. And being able to do this operationally kind of sets us apart.
Certainly. So we've got quite a few questions that are actually been rolling in. So just two last pieces, and then we'll dive into some of the questions. So I guess the one quick item, you've touched on it a bit here, but prior to getting introduced to VECKTA, did you anticipate when things were winding down with the previous supplier that you were engaged with, Did you anticipate getting an opportunity to engage, in this case, five other providers within the market to have them compete for your business?
No. In all likelihood, what I was basically going to end up doing would be to reach out to one or two other connections and maybe, find one other provider that, we would vet and then see what their proposal would look like in comparison. And clearly not be able to compare it, in kind of the apples to apples way that this was done. So, I mean, our other option was just to go out and try and find them independently, and do this manually from the position of an outsider and try and get to the same place, which was never going to work as well.
Yeah, certainly. So, as a closing thought, I'd love to just hear from you, and then we'll get to some of the questions from the audience. But why is all this important to you?
I mean, the part of it is, being here, and this is a shot from the brewery also. We're surrounded by, the beauty of Mendocino County. It's impossible not to think of environmental practices and being responsible, sustainable business. But also, we bought this brewery in order to run it as a multi-generational thing. This is, I'm intending this to be my last job. I'm going to do this for 25 years or so and hand it off to my daughter or my sister. And the idea of long-term thinking is the reason why we got involved in this. And so the sustainable parts of our long-term practices is part of not just the ethos of the brewery before we got here, but it's part of why we're doing it too. The other thing is, and it's in here, immediate need. A lot of fire stuff going on in Northern California, power stability and that kind of thing. This was one of the things that we knew we had to fix. Developing redundancy and confidence in our power supply was something on the list from when we were acquiring the brewery that we needed to go into. And then also, which has become much more vivid, as supply chain costs go up, is being able to do some containment on our costs where we can. This is, mentioned before, trying to take advantage of the time to control the things that we can control during COVID. Well, this was one of the things that we identified that we might be able to control. And so being able to kind of, put some brackets on and a roof on what our utility costs increase were going to be, over, a 10, 20 year plus timeline was an incredible opportunity. So I want to be able to hand this off to my daughter, with, a system and an energy plan in place that is still running and is still a good idea when she takes hold of the reins here. And this is, really kind of what was driving what we were thinking about when we started the process.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate all the questions that have come in from the audience. So first, I will take a question here from Zach. So Zach had asked, how did you identify 20% load as the correct number for ride-through as far as the islanding capabilities with the shutoffs?
Yeah, good question. We identified what were kind of the critical components of being able to stabilize brewery functions. So having enough notice. We're a PG&E resource center in the event of a public safety power outage. So if they do shut the power off, they will notify us, and we've agreed to allow them to roll in a bunch of trucks and generators and stuff and become a community center. So we have at least a little bit advance notice, a pretty vivid advance notice that they're coming in. In doing that, we identified, running certain compressors and some other just critical functions in order to maintain some of the liquid that we have in process. And that amount is probably about 12-15% of our normal load. So we scaled it to 20% to make sure that we were, able to take care of, the core functions so that we wouldn't have to, lose or destroy product.
Yeah, and I remember from some of the previous conversations, being able to maintain those critical functions while still keeping in mind the economics of the project as well.
We would scale. a lot of the power usage for things like the packaging lines or some other stuff, we just wouldn't do that. We would schedule them out. But the refrigeration, temperature control, that kind of stuff is critical.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question, Zach. So another question that came in from Pranav was, how long before some of the components would have to be changed out, such as batteries, the photovoltaic cells themselves? I can help answer that too as well, Kevin. But, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
The PV, I think, is 20 years or so. Off the top of my head, I'm not really sure about the batteries, but there is components in the models that we have for replacement of batteries at end of life. Don't know off the top of my head what it is, but it's baked into the cost.
Yeah, I believe the way that it's baked into the model right now is planned or expected replacement about the 10-year mark, but then monitoring the battery health. But that's built into the model to replace the batteries at the 10-year mark. But again, making sure to keep in mind how that's the health of the battery at that point. Quick question from Robert: will the recording be available to participants? Absolutely. I believe immediately after, within a couple minutes after, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording. And actually, earlier there was another question, I believe, from John. Any concerns with owning assets at the end of the firm, any concerns with owning assets at the end that your firm doesn't have experience with, or do you have experience with these? So owning assets that you don't necessarily have experience with.
Yeah, I think, and that was a consideration. Part of the comfort level that we have is that we have been continuously operating a solar array. So we do have some experience in-house with just some of the basics of it. The area that we don't have present knowledge and capabilities really is in the switching system, and we'll have 15 plus years to develop that. I also, one of the connections that I initially reached out to was in sort of the microgrid and islanding switching system, sort of software and hardware components. So there were specific vendors there, and in talking with them too, a lot of it is we're going to be licensing software and technology, and there's a maintenance and operations contract there as well. So by the time we would end up owning it, I think right now the lease is either 12 or 15 year, and then we buy the residual from that point. Pretty confident that we'll have a level of comfort with the technology by then. But like I said, we have an on-site maintenance and engineering division that has been operating and maintaining the array since 2005. So we're kind of comfortable there. We do a lot of, because of also where we're located, we're pretty handy ourselves, and so the capabilities and the skills that the team has here is actually probably a little bit more elevated than in a lot of other circumstances. So I guess the short version is that we're confident we'll figure it out by the time we own it.
Yes. So another question came in from Micah. What's the interconnection process been like for Anderson Valley? The follow-up to that was, how much does it vary from service territory to service territory? Not sure if because you're really focused on PG&E and where you're located, but maybe Kevin, you can comment on the interconnection process so far.
So far, the interconnection process has not really been an issue. I mean, in terms of like our current relationship with PG&E is, it's just been just the same relationship for years. As we move forward, it's the vendor that is actually going through the interconnection paperwork in terms of trying to grandfather us into the previous rate and that kind of thing, and they're taking on all of that. And so I actually don't really need to get that involved in it, because that's part of what our vendor is able to bring to us, which is another huge piece of value that we've got out of it.
Yeah, excellent. Micah, we can certainly take the question offline as well for if there's particular service territories you're thinking about. So I guess the closing question Given that you've had an experience of going down both engaging with one of the leading, to your point, microgrid development companies, and having things ultimately fall apart due to contractual terms, and then going down the VECKTA path, maybe you can just share briefly as we close just the difference in kind of your peace of mind and kind of the value, if you will, that the value that VECKTA has brought to the table for you.
VECKTA is awesome. And I'm not being paid or anything like that to do this kind of stuff. Dan basically just asked me if I would be willing to kind of talk about my experience, and my experience has been unwaveringly positive with the team. The team at VECKTA, first of all, they're super knowledgeable, both in not only their own platform but also the industry itself, and so they were super helpful in refining our RFP, going through that, and then kind of getting that out. We're great sounding boards for how to communicate certain things and how to kind of speak to the community, as well as during the evaluation process, giving us guardrails on sort of what is more or less industry standard and what may be aberrant when we had those kind of questions too. So they didn't really kind of tell us what to do or what was better or anything like that, but they educated us to a level where we could make those decisions, which was awesome. I mean, the comparison between the other process was really night and day. I mean, we walked into a conversation with a vendor that was a sole source of information on a lot of these things, and a lot of it would be very complicated and difficult and time consuming for me to do any kind of like deep checking on. So I really only had the opportunity to do kind of surface evaluation. It wasn't until we got to contracts, which is something I've got a lot of experience in, that a lot of it sort of fell apart. And then during the VECKTA process, we were able to spot some more technological aspects that were probably out of the range of what would have been the best option for us. And I never would have known that if it wasn't for the ability to kind of compare it and have those conversations about the different proposals too. So like I said, I'm not a paid spokesperson or anything like that. And Dan basically asked me if I'd be willing to talk about this. And frankly, my experience was so positive. I'm happy to do whatever I can to support what these guys are doing.
Awesome. Kevin, I really appreciate the time, taking an hour out of your busy day. I know you've got a lot going on, but I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that attended. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself. If you have any questions specifically about Anderson Valley for Kevin, feel free to jot down his contact info here. Be sure to follow the brewery. As Kevin's not lying, the beer is great. I've got some in my fridge right now. Please go out and support Anderson Valley Brewing Company. And if they're not at your local stores, ask the stores to carry them. Anyways, thank you all for your time. And Kevin, appreciate it. We'll close for now.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to say these same things when Dan's not listening. So
perfect. Thank you all.